short follow-up on how often trust and estate plans need to be revisited. And the general notion is that no more frequently than 3 years, and about 5 years is just about right, unless there's been significant changes in your life, like you've come into a substantial inheritance, you've had a particularly good couple of years in business, and your assets have grown. You need to start thinking about how to create or protect those assets and or those inheritances. So you need to create perhaps some designation of beneficiaries for these new, this increase in your personal wealth. Or, if you've inherited 400 acres in West Texas, you need to have this plan revisited and touched on, so that way there is a roadmap for distribution to future heirs, and there's a way for these estate plans to naturally expand as assets are added. In other words, if you inherit, I think the estimate is that as our boomers pass on, and unfortunately they will pass on, it's going to be one of the largest transfers of wealth in the history of this nation, because they were born after World War II, have been industrious and worked way longer than any other, and lived longer than any other American generation. And they're going to transfer to their children millions in assets, which of course are going to be taxed. But that transfer is one of the reasons why every 3 to 5 years, or when there's a substantial change in your life, you need to think about revisiting your life planning documents. And here's a good reason to revisit that. A lot of people pass, and I always encourage this, to pass assets by contract. In other words, big annuities, big life insurance plans, big ways that you can avoid the entire probate process, deeds on death, leaving your home or your farm or that 400 acres that you inherited directly to your children. These are all ways to pass assets by contract, avoid the probate process entirely as much as possible. Alternative to a trust, and very inexpensive. The problem is people forget to bring, either when they're doing their final estate plans, they forget to bring their change of beneficiary forms, or they don't do it. And I have literally seen this fracture a family because the last time Grandma updated her change of beneficiary form, she was a rookie police officer and she left everything to her mother. Well, now Grandma has been married for 35 years or 40 years and has sons, daughters, and grandchildren, and all that money is left by contract to their great-grandmother. And fortunately, a lot of times those relatives do the absolute right thing, but if it passes by contract, they're not required to. So because there were children and grandchildren that needed to be cared for, that all worked out. But changing those beneficiaries and taking a good look at where you're leaving your assets every 3 to 5 years, or when there's been a substantial change, is critical. So, general reminder, if you haven't looked at your life insurance beneficiary designations and you don't know, or you don't have a deed on death on your property, those are things that you may want to get in order before it becomes a problem. And if you can make those things pass by a contract or a deed on death or anything like that, it avoids the probate process, which saves a lot of time and effort if all of the assets can pass outside the probate process, and you don't need a trust. So you save several $1,000s in drafting a trust declaration and then funding that trust with assets. So just remember, every 3 to 5 years, make sure you've updated those documents, and keep those documents in a place they're easy to find, so that way if people need them, they can get at them.